So then we are back with more understandings from the Aramaic English translation of the scriptures. And it's very important understanding these end of times and what it means of reading the word and understanding where it's coming from. The Megillas, or then the writings of old of the Hebrews, those are related with mostly the services in a temple or in the tabernacle. And in the future, when he ascended, his people, the set apart, would simply go around the world forming holy lands. And each holy land, simply a farm, would then have a tabernacle where they would practice the second service. The reason why you have Hebrews in the scriptures, it's because it gives you the updates of the first service. So then these days we can expect a return of those camps, because those went in disrepair many centuries ago. But then we understand these days that the church is an absolute fraud. The true fact was the Hebrews had then the second service given them, and they would go around the world forming then holy lands and establishing and practicing and perfecting the second service. This was truly the presence of the Creator. So from the thousands of denominations you can ever find, each of them simply a fraud. They never existed, and you can be sure of it, because when you read from the Aramaic Hebraic understanding, then you begin to understand what it meant. The presence of Elohim, or the true holy God, Yahweh, was found in each camp. And then he would shepherd the Gentiles. There are no giftings of the Spirit, but rather simply functions of Ruach HaKodesh. Each person in a camp would be then involved with the ministry, and then some of them would be endowed with a function or more, and then they would shepherd the Gentiles outside of the camp. After their duties were done, then they would return to the camp and then remain secluded. That's the meaning of then the faith and then the anointing. Gentiles are entrusted with the renewed covenant. That's why you have then the understanding of the Hebrews, and the Word gives you the updates. However, in each camp they maintain the whole scriptures, including the Torah, the prophets, the writings, and also the renewed covenant. But the Gentiles, they only have as reference the renewed covenant. They don't get involved with the Torah, the prophets, and also the writings. So then what is badly mixed these days must be unweaved or unmixed. You have the holy Hebrews mixed with the world's system and the trades where they never should have not. So then the set apart, they should be remaining in their camps practicing the second service. The Gentiles, however, they should never be ministering. So can you imagine the evil mixed up in our world? The Creator gave specific instructions. The set apart, the holy Hebrews, were to set up camps around the world and then shepherd the Gentiles. And then the set apart should never be mixed with the world's system. They should never govern the world's system, but they should be only representatives of yet the kingdom to come. They should be in their camps quietly and productively, understanding the oracles and the writings, and then ministering to the Gentiles outside. Absolutely no interference with this world system. That's the true meaning of the anointing in the camp. Churches are absolutely fraud. It's a fraudulent establishment, and it was concocted, made it up, lied, never existed. People that were indoctrinated in false translations, false doctrines, false concocted theories. It never existed. So then these days we are facing a very important election this year, and what a person can say regarding who to be then in charge. If we select a Democrat, then it's synonymous of anarchy. If we select a person as Republican, then becomes an absolutely orgy of stupidity. Because churches do not exist. And then who wants to be involved with a system from the past, concocted lies? Nobody wants to be under the burden of a false church that never existed. Those times of the past, they were miserable. Because people were living in a false hope, false identity, false doctrines. And the truth of it was, when then Moshe brought the people out of Egypt and went near the mountain, and then Moshe went up the mountain, he received the holy laws, came down, and they formed the tabernacle. Thus the first service was established. Then afterward they went to the holy hand of Moses, then taking the people, and then they were given then the land for them to be in, and they only had a transfer of the tabernacle onto the land, and then they trained over there for more than 1,000 years how to be shepherds of the Gentiles. Then later, when the Mashiach came, he brought the first anointing, so then the second service would be put in practice. And then they would go around the world forming then holy lands. Merely a farm with a service area and then a camp in the center of it. That's what the presence of Elohim is. The rest of it, it's simply concocted lies. And then these lies are extended in churches, extended in learning centers, extended at work, and never worked. It was a misery ever since it started. You want an example of these? You can read in Yehuda. Yehuda or Jude gives you then the idea of then the people on their way to form another holy land. Or they are going around, they're going to set up another farm. They had to find a land so they could work the land, provide for the camp, and then select then the people to do the service for them outside. Obviously those people were saved, but they were Goyim or Gentile. And these days then we are ready for selection of another president. Are we going to be in the old shackles, so to speak, or the old ways of religious junk that never worked? Or we are going to select the anarchy? Truly the best would be a Democrat that can understand the fact of the truth of the camps. Because the camps are independent and they don't mix themselves with the world system. They simply remain quietly and they give directives to those that are coming to the gates for direction. They don't impose their directions in any person. They don't impose the Torah, they don't impose the prophets, don't impose the writings. They simply give directives to those who are coming to them, as it was before during the time of Shaul at the end of his ministry. It's going to be real bad if the people decide to select then the old ways of false churches. It's going to be miserable. Neither we should be anarchists. Only because there is no church, then go to heck. In other words. No, there is a factor of the camps, and those are then the places that we get directions from. If we ask. As we understand also, synagogues are a fraud. Synagogues should not exist, because they should be in camps where they read and they maintain loyalty to the Creator. Should be in the camps and then ministering to the Gentiles outside the camps. But then we have Hebrews mixing with the world system. We have them stealing the trades of the Gentiles. They don't minister to the Gentiles. They push the Torah, the prophets upon the people, and then on the other side there is the church, falsely invented, practicing ministry they should never done it. So if you ask what is the best, it's truly having a Democrat that understands the factor of the truth of it. What's the truth of it? And then leave it at that. In other words, let then the camps return, then be quiet, as they were centuries ago. So then the whole situation of religiosity is taken care of, done away with, and quietly being led to do what they should be doing, practicing the second service, but not openly. And the rest of it's pure junk. How many scandals have you found so far related with the church? Thousands and thousands of these scoundrels, holy scoundrels. But they receive tax breaks and they receive also benefits from the government for being scoundrels. So then when we begin to read the understanding of then Shaliach Shaul, we begin to understand a transition of time from the time the Messiah ascended and then the holy writings. For instance, Galatians, Ephesians, and then the other Megillas, you begin to understand a transitional time. For the first 100 years was the main time where they begin to make a huge transition from the first service and the second service. However, prior of the writings of Shaul, the Messiah himself gave directives much more completed than Shaul. If you think Shaul then did a great job by writing 2/3 of the renewed covenant, if we would have the records of the Messiah himself, he would far outweigh the writings of Shaul. He explained a whole lot more. At the very least 10, 20 times what he did. But then the pagans, they stole those Megillas and they scoundrelized them. Some of them they burned because they knew the kingdom to come was true. And what we have recorded today in the 4 links or relinks, it's only 10%. So no more deceit with these junky churches out there. Those never existed. Any denomination you can think of, lies, lies upon lies. Denominations shouldn't exist because then the Messiah said, do not have leaders lording over yourselves, because he then gave the directives. The camps are the ultimate authorities. Only believe what the Messiah said. That's faith. Simply, this is what it means, faith. You believe what the Messiah said and you have the recorded renewed covenant. And then you visit at the camp often for further teaching. That's it. And then you resume your normal life. You don't have to search for a gifting because it does not exist. You don't have to search for a position in the church because church does not exist. Positions in a church is absolutely wrong. Try to understand this factor. When the renewed covenant came, the 4 relinks and then the acts of Ruach HaKodesh, the camps, plural, were not around. The reason why they had to have deacons, because then the people, they were starting to be shepherded. Can you try to understand? It was not for at least from 50 to 100 years later then the camps became solidly founded. So that's why then you find deacons and other people involved with the leadership, because the leadership was not yet set. The Shilishim, or then so named apostles, doesn't exist the word apostle from the Hebraic understanding, but the Shilishim, they were endowed with the kingdom to come task of teaching, plus also the relink. But they had to organize themselves yet in many people, so then they would go around the world forming farms. Farms is simply a piece of land and then with a tabernacle in the center. Thus the camp. And then they would shepherd the Gentiles. Couldn't be any simpler. So then when you read the first portion of the writings, then you understand why there were deacons. Why there were other people over there involved with the leadership, because then they didn't have enough leaders back then in their camps. Camps were not even formed. Then later, those positions so much requested, those were gone. Because then the camps were already formed. The Gentiles then, they had to provide for themselves, and they would practice what they've learned. Whereas the service people, that's why you find the word servant. Servant does not mean servants or service of the faith. It is related with the land, with the servicing of the land. Those places, they were on farms. When you read the leaders of the servants, does not mean a pastor, teacher, evangelist, miracle worker, or any of this junk. Simply were then the leaders of the land while servicing the land. planting, harvesting, taking care of the animals, making sure the camps are provisioned. That's why you read leaders, make sure then treat your servants with dignity and respect. Using a season of salt meant every now and then use a bit of the Torah for teaching. But then the teaching form was in the form of sharing based upon what they were engaged in. Servicing the land, that's what it means, servants. The rest of them are believers. Believers in the Mashiach. If you do the work then outside of the camp or the farm area, you are simply a believer. So you begin to delineate each of those words. Set apart are then the Hebraic people in their camps. They are endowed only from power from on high, and then they practice the second service with the 7 spirits of Elohim, 7 functions. And what are they then? Words of wisdom, words of knowledge, miracles, and then tongues, interpretation of tongues, healings, and the discerning of spirits. Those so mistakenly by giftings, those are functions only given to those people in the camps. Then there are the Gentiles outside of the camp. The Gentiles are believers, simply believers. They come often to the gates for further teaching. Then you have the servants of the land, farm workers, also believers, but they are servicing the land. They are planting, they are harvesting, they are gathering, they are taking care of the animals and provisioning the camp. So there you have the whole situation straightened out, nice and beautiful. And then these days, there are so many people involved with the congregations that are absolutely teaching junk. So any part of the word from the Aramaic translation, try to understand. Do not read Greco-Roman. There is only a copy worthy of reading, and that's the Aramaic Hebraic understanding. When you read the Aramaic, so then you understand. Set apart are the Hebrews. Gentiles are the believers. Don't mix those, ever. Gentiles, they do not minister, and they do not have any kind of a ministry. Then they service people, and they service the land. So they provision the camp. And then imagine this set up in many areas around the world. Thus the presence of Elohim with us. The rest are absolutely fraud. They were concocted. They were invented. When the Greco-Romans, they were translating the word, they did not understand, and some of them, they lied in purpose. When they were translated Acts of Ruach HaKodesh, they came to Cornelius. He was a Roman centurion from the army. To make then the Romans important, when they were translated, they lied. They simply stated that because he was from the army, a centurion, he had a vision from an angel. Angels don't show up to Gentiles. But because he was a Roman soldier and a Roman centurion, they want to make themselves important. Then they lied. Simply they said, oh, had a vision from heaven. Visions are not given outside of the camp. and then he was a pagan. Do you think an angelic being would show up to a pagan? You have to be joking. And then Yohanan on the island of Patmos, he did not write from Patmos. He wrote from the mainland while secured in a camp. So then try to get yourselves a copy, worthy copy from the Aramaic Hebraic understanding. So then you understand what it means. The rest of all those denominations, they are absolutely a fraud. They fraud with your money, they fraud with your understanding, they fraud with your beliefs, and they make you stupid. So then with this new election coming in, what would be the best for the country then? Obviously finding a candidate with understanding of the camps. Or do you want to be part of a junky establishment that lies to you? Doesn't care? And then they know upon death they're going straight down, because there is not going to heaven. Going to heaven does not exist. It was made up and concocted. Either a person is obedient to the instructions given, Gentiles in the level of the renewed covenant, set apart in their camps in the level of Torah, the prophets, and the renewed covenant, or then straight down. Because those that are not obedient are judged. It's past tense. The Creator made it in such a way, very simple. A person dies without the Mashiach, disobedient, judged. The judgment is given already while the person is living. Each person he is or her own judge. The people, they judge themselves. That's why we have the understanding of practicing justices. If you practice what is just or justices, then you are practicing justice. Judge yourselves. There is no judgment to come. People are not coming from the dead on this earth. Gentiles are not going to behold the returning of the Mashiach. The Mashiach is returning in the 20th chapter of Revelation. Only the set apart in their camps and the beloved city, they are going to behold Him coming. The rest of us are dead. We are resting in the Mashiach, or those that die without Him are tormented in the first death's chamber. Until the earth is ablaze, and then they are thrown in the earth to be burnt. Please stay tuned. Much more coming up.